Hey guys, what is up? It is Bibzuda7 here again, and welcome to another RuneScape 3 video here today. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Necromancy reveal, my thoughts on it, and just basically what they did reveal in case you missed it somehow, which I highly doubt. But before I get into that, I know it's been quite a long time since I uploaded a video. My last video was back in March for the Murder on the Border quest release. And before that, I wasn't really actively uploading since December of last year. So I have been on a pretty decently sized hiatus, just been playing other games and also been working quite a bit, been pretty busy at my job. So not as much time to play, even if I were. But yeah, I just kind of didn't have much motivation to play the game and wasn't really getting into it too much. But I am definitely going to come back for sure when Necromancy comes out, but I might make some Hardcore Iron Man episodes in the near future, considering I still have so many clips available. As far as footage on the screen, I am going to be, of course, showing the reveal article, which is what I'm going to be reviewing, and also just going to be rune crafting in the background at the rune span here. But yeah, so I guess let's just jump right into it. New combat style. I don't know what I was expecting from Necromancy, but it absolutely was not that it would be a new combat style. That is absolutely crazy to even think about them adding a new combat style. Range, magic, and melee have been the three combat styles since Classic. So to think of them adding an entirely new one makes some sense given the state of the game and how it's, EOC. Like, it would have been really hard to understand adding a new combat style to the original game of, like Legacy or whatever you want to call it, the old school combat system. But with EOC, it actually does make some sense. And when I first heard it, like I got to the reveal video a little bit late. And if you haven't, by the way, if you haven't watched the reveal video, highly recommend that. And then there was also, I think, like 7 or 8 select content creators that got to go to Jagex and playtest and get exclusive footage there. They all have videos that they uploaded, which contain quite a few additional details that the reveal didn't cover. So if you're not up to date on all of that information, maybe you want to go check those out. I haven't watched every one of the content creators' videos who went there, but I did watch a few of them, and yeah, I think I've got a pretty good idea of everything at this point. So yeah, that's basically that. But yeah, new combat style, absolutely insane that they would actually do this. But yeah, like I said, when I first heard about it, I was a little bit late to the stream just because I was in the middle of something and I was planning on watching it, but I just missed it. I thought it was going to be an actual stream. I didn't know it was a premiere video on YouTube. So that's why I was kind of not paying super close attention. But anyway, when I first heard new combat style, I was kind of like, I'm not so sure that's a good idea or if that will work out. But as I've learned more about it, I've kind of started to think more and more that it sounds like it's going to be really, really cool. And I am really excited for it now that I've learned about it quite a bit more. But given the track record of combat, it was just a little bit unnerving to me at first, given how they can barely seem to do well at balancing the 3 existing styles. But anyway, that was just my initial reaction. But again, now that I've heard a lot more about it, I am really, really excited for this to be released. And we'll see, the details here as we go down the list. So yeah, Necromancy, new combat style. No idea. I don't think anybody expected this, but definitely I didn't. But yeah, basically they say that they are building on the learnings from archaeology, and it really does sound like that compared to other, skill releases like divination. Mainly is the one that comes to mind, which was a pretty bare bones skill without a whole lot to use it for at the release. And even now, I mean, you only really use divination to unlock and support invention, just with the energy. So it's definitely, compared to something like archaeology, which has the lore. Like, archaeology is still easily the best update they've ever done in the entirety of RuneScape's history, in my opinion. So it's going to be tough to top it with this, but it looks like they are going to be really trying, considering all the stuff that's coming alongside the skill. So yeah, as I said, there's these 7 content creators who got to go out there and then made videos on it. So check those out if you are interested. But basically, it's outside the existing combat triangle, which I think makes sense. It wouldn't have really made a whole lot of sense to turn the combat triangle into some sort of other shape. It wouldn't work as a square, I don't think, considering it wouldn't have been able to slot in any of those spots because that's just the nature of it. So it's going to be neutral against all combat styles. So no need to worry about weaknesses, although weaknesses have hardly been relevant, especially in endgame PVM, for a long time now. So not really that surprising. But the structure of how you get the gear for it is kind of surprising to me a little bit. Because obviously you think new combat style, like there's so many things that go into a single combat style. Different gear, different weapons, obviously. And then an entire list of abilities obviously are important too. So it definitely is a lot of new stuff that they'd have to add. But with the gear, it's kind of just going to be, it sounds like something you have upgrade as you level up all the way up until tier 90. So it sounds like this is going to be a really, really strong for like new Iron Men to use. So I was just kind of surprised to hear that that's the way they're doing it. Obviously, you have smithing to support melee, and then crafting to support range, and kind of magic as well. But this skill is going to be standalone like archaeology. And it is going to go up to 120. So that's that's obviously expected for a new skill, but the fact that it's a combat style and it goes up to 120, it just kind of seems like, on top of all the stuff we've heard about what's coming with it and what some of the abilities are, kind of sounds like this is just going to be the strongest combat style bar none on release and for the foreseeable future, because of a couple things. There's a reworked accuracy system that so far they've only said is applying to Necromancy, which is huge for many bosses, and it goes up to 120. So your stats are obviously higher and will be better as far as the damage and everything related to it goes. Something that I kind of gleaned and thought was a bit funny from everything they said when the content creators were interviewing them and what they talked about around the reveal. This basically sounds like they're kind of just saying, we're giving up on teaching players the current combat system, and we made Necromancy for them to pick up instead. Because obviously with the new combat style, it's going to have its own unique abilities and all of that, and they can build it from the ground up to be easily learnable by new people, which is not the case at all for the existing combat styles and all their weird nuances like auto weaving and stuff like that. So I think that's overall going to be a good thing. I just thought it was kind of funny that they felt the need to go this far to make that a reality by creating a new combat style to help people onboard onto the game. Cape looks really cool. Basically inverted thieving, black and purple, I believe. But that was a really big focus on it. And then that obviously bleeds into the ability to get the gear quite easily. As you can see here, Necromancy armor and weapons will be upgradable without the need to chase drops. As you complete quests and challenges, you'll be able to use new materials to upgrade your armor all the way up to tier 90. So that is pretty insane. Definitely very unprecedented to have it so accessible in terms of the gear as well, especially considering the price of things that are high end nowadays. The base of Necromancy, where a lot of the activities and training is going to take place, is the underworld city of which is an interest. I think it's right? They say or or whatever. I think is what it's called, because people forgot the name, which is a pretty classic, like stupid RuneScape punny type thing, which definitely fits into the aesthetic of the game, if nothing else. If you don't like it, I mean, I kind of don't really care that much. I feel like it could have probably had a cooler name at the end of the day, but it's a funny little tidbit that they kind of went in on. And it's going to be basically focusing on this first necromancer, as they called it, the antagonist of the skill, which is kind of interesting to have as a thing. But that's going to be who you're tasked with, I guess, stopping or whatever when you first do the tutorial and stuff like that. You'll be tasked with harnessing the art of necromancy to free the undead and put a stop to the first necromancer. So that's what this whole city is going to be for. There's going to be training methods to do there. There's non-combat training methods, similar to how Magic has spells like High Alch and things like that, which you can use to train. Nowadays, obviously, that's horribly inefficient, but back in the day and still today on old school RuneScape, people will just stand around high alching for hours to train their magic up, which is obviously a combat style. So it's not an unprecedented thing in the system, but that's good to see. I think it's nice. It'll be nice to have that ability. But this is honestly probably the craziest part to me. But if you think about it, archaeology kind of came with this as well, aside, bar the bosses. But Necromancy is going to be releasing with 7 quests and 2 new bosses, which is pretty insane. If you think about it, archaeology had all those mysteries, which were kind of like mini quests, and there were a ton of those. So thinking of 7 quests coming out, that's a ton of quests. I mean, obviously that is, I don't think we've ever had such a big release in terms of actual full-on quest content. Menaphos is probably the biggest one I can remember in terms of a batch of quest releases, but then those you couldn't even all do on the first day really because of the rep system. You won't be able to do all these on the first day either, I guess, because you have to level up your necromancy to unlock them, I'm sure, but still, that is pretty insane. 7 quests and 2 bosses, one of those bosses being this first necromancer who you're trying to train up your necromancy to take on and defeat. And interestingly, in what I believe is a first, you will only be able to kill this boss with necromancy. I don't think any other boss completely restricts your combat style usage to a singular style. I can look at the list, I guess, of bosses, but I'm pretty sure you have the option of using any style at most bosses. Some maybe you can't really melee, but yeah, I can't really think of one aside from, obviously you have like Corp requires the spear to do a lot of damage, but you can still range it if you really want, or use any melee weapon or mage. Yeah, I don't think there's any. Calphite Queen obviously has prayers, so that'll be interesting because the Calphite Queen is probably not going to have a prayer against necromancy, so maybe that'll be the best way to kill her, although not really a challenge in today's meta, but still an interesting thought. So yeah, going to be a unique scenario where that boss will only allow you to kill it with necromancy, which makes sense in the context of it because it's the boss that you're training your skill to stop. So it would make sense to have that be the restriction on it. And that boss will give tier 95 necromancy weapons and armor. So it looks like they'll be skipping tier 92 for necromancy. That won't be available, at least on the release. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, that's pretty crazy that there's 2 new bosses. I don't know what they do say here. Hermod, the Spirit of War. I don't know who that is. But yeah, that's one of the bosses, and then the first necromancer. And they both can only be killed with necromancy. So I assume the Hermod is going to be like a boss that you fight on your way up there. I don't know what he will drop. Each boss can be fought as a fully fledged boss once conquered in the quest. So there'll be a part of a quest and then a farmable boss afterward. I assume tier 95s will only drop from the first necromancer. I don't know what this other boss will drop. But yeah, absolutely insane. 2 new bosses. You wouldn't expect with the release of a skill to have PVM content directly on the release, but given this is a combat style, it definitely makes sense to give us something to test our metal against with the new combat style right away, even though, of course, we have a complete slew of bosses in the game that you could take it to if you're familiar enough with them. But yeah, that is just absolutely nuts. And so that got me pretty hyped to hear that there's new bosses as well. I honestly was really not that excited for the necromancy announcement. I wasn't expecting them to be able to live up to archaeology, but it sounds like they have a pretty fair shot at possibly managing to do that, which is really surprising to me. And honestly impressive to how if this is as good as archaeology, that to me, that's a really good sign for the future of the game in general, because it shows that they can repeatably do big releases like archaeology and like this well and to a high quality. So yeah, I really hope it works out well, and I am definitely really looking forward to seeing it come out. Like, I just really wasn't expecting a combat style So this is a part of the city somewhere, I believe, and this is the way you train without combat. They're called rituals. They looked pretty complicated. Well, not complicated, but it looked like there's quite a bit that goes into them when they were when I saw them on the previews that people had. It's a nice method. It sounds like it's going to be a nice method because you can either pay attention a decent amount and get extra XP, kind of probably similar to like doing rock opportunities or clicking while you're doing safe cracking, stuff like that. Or you can just AFK it. And I think these are also going to be really important to do for like Iron Man and just for people in general, possibly as a money-making method. I'm not sure, because it looks like these are going to produce some sort of material or supply that you're going to need to use in Necromancy somehow. It's not entirely clear, but these rituals do use bones. So existing bones, I mean, you could kind of had assumed that Necromancy was going to require bones in some shape or form, but it is now confirmed. You'll see there's a list that we'll get to that shows all the existing items in the game that are going to be used in Necromancy to provide a level playing field for all players to consider if they want to try merchanting stuff. So that's kind of an interesting approach that they didn't take with archaeology, although archaeology really didn't have a whole lot of stuff that was involved in it. But yeah. This will allow, so as you can see, the skilling style experience will get XP and new items and materials to help with other parts of the skill. So that's important. And then there's also in this same area or a nearby area, or hold on, let me make sure I finish reading this here. So yeah, you'll draw glyphs, place light sources, and use a focus object. There'll be 12 rituals, which honestly doesn't sound like a whole lot, considering, I mean, I guess it depends what they produce and how different they all are, but we'll definitely have to see. So yeah, as you can see, you'll acquire materials that can be sold if you want to use it that way, and can be used as a non-combat method, although will almost definitely be slower XP, I'm sure. They also introduced this interesting new thing to as a part of the Necromancy skill. So there's still going to be your standard, like level ups, like here, you can just look at the list of level ups. There's still going to be unlocks at different levels for different things, of course. That's still going to be part of the skill. That would be ridiculous for that not to be part of the skill. But also, I assume this is going to be at certain levels, you'll get these talent points, which can then be applied to this skill tree that they show here to unlock either new abilities, or there's this actually new like spell book as well, this Necromancy spell book, which it's not actually a spell book. Like you can use it whenever you want. It's they're called inscriptions. So that'll be an additional part of Necromancy that is possible to utilize. And I think it'll be able to use it in any combat style. So that's definitely interesting. But you have to pick and choose which of these you want to unlock. At the end, when you're 120, this whole thing will be unlocked. But as you level up, you do have to pick which one of these you unlock. So the first one, or no, not the first one. This one that's being hovered is at tier 5. And it's life transfer, which is used to extend the duration of your spirits, which is part of the combat style. You can summon these spirits to help you out. And they sound like they're going to be really strong. And this is an extremely important ability to helping you extend their life by 15 seconds. You might notice you can extend the duration of each by 15 seconds, and it also has a 15-second cooldown. So potentially if you tick perfect and have the health to spare, considering it does take 50% of your life points to do it, you could keep them alive forever, maybe. But I think this is a cool approach. Lets you maybe take a unique path towards getting your skill maxed out. Maybe certain things will be better to take early on and you want to take those, or maybe you want certain things early on. Like as a person who plays mainly hardcore Iron Man, maybe a couple of these things will be more defensive focused and you want to take those first, whereas other people may want to take, the more damage oriented things first. Like this life transfer sounds very scary to use given how much damage it deals to you. But it is pretty interesting. There's the different tiers that you can level up and slowly get. And yeah, definitely a really, really cool system, I think, and an interesting way for them to implement choice into the leveling up of your skill. There's also going to be 4 new runes available, so rune crafting is going to be involved somehow. That's partially why I'm training my rune crafting up here. I want to get that to 99 before the release, just in case. But there's going to be, they're called necrotic runes, so they're not the same as normal runes, and you'll have to craft them here at these new altars, which I assume are somewhere in the city in some way. But they will be bone, spirit, flesh, and miasma runes, and these things, the incantations will be using those runes. You can see here, this one requires, I think that's, well, I don't know what rune that is, but requires 5 of one of the runes. And it will take regular essence, and then you convert it into impure essence through the ritual system, and that will allow you to craft the runes. They are purple, which is interesting, and I've heard you can't put them in a rune pouch, so that's kind of weird. Maybe there'll be some unlock or drop through necromancy somehow that you can get to modify a rune pouch to be able to hold them at some point. That would make sense. They talk about how it's obviously going to be helped by creators who gave them feedback. There'll be more content after the launch, of course. The leveling experience is going to be a little bit different because obviously it being a combat skill, you can overload and stuff and get really quick level ups. So they're modifying that some way, nerfing ED3 as usual, or as they've said quite a few times rather. Let's check out the full list now of items that are going to be used by necromancy. Pure essence, as I mentioned. Overloads, obviously, because that's a combat style. You're going to want to use your overloads. Importantly, definitely go ahead and make lots of as many overloads as you can, basically. Make them all before the release, because they will then get converted, or, they'll basically work with necromancy. And then if you make them after the update, they require necromancy potions to make. So definitely want to pre-make as many overloads as you possibly can, as that will help you out on saving extra supplies and stuff after release. Every type of bone, I think, is listed here, probably, surely. Or maybe not. That doesn't look like every bone, but probably every bone will be usable in the rituals in some way. Strangely, subjugation specifically is listed here. Not sure how that's going to play in. And then also draconic visages are listed, which is interesting considering how much they've fallen to how they used to be. Maybe they'll become a good drop for some reason again. And then the spectral spirit shield, I was really surprised to see as well. Who knows what that's going to be involved in, but an interesting item to be listed. Also, a couple of pieces of magic armor aside from subjugation, these two, and then Algorum thread, which is the thread that makes Serenic currently. So some strange items on this list. Definitely interested to see how they play into it, but a little bit of a shopping list for you if you're, a main or even on an Iron Man, you want to start collecting these items to get prepared. That could be a good idea. Of course, there's a normal XP embargo, Comp Cave grace period for the release, and that's basically it for this article. But I have more to talk about after, so I'll switch over and talk about that. But it is coming out this year. They haven't confirmed the launch date yet, so probably quite late in the year. October to December timeframe is my guess, but still, I'm really looking forward to it, and pretty cool article to read through if you're interested in, fully learning more after watching videos and stuff. All right, so yeah, just had a few more things I wanted to cover because that article didn't have really a whole lot of details in it, but there were quite a few additional things revealed from the content creators' videos that were kind of interesting to talk about. The first of those being what a bunch of the spell things do from the Necromancy spellbook, and some of these are pretty insane. So first of all, you have there's 2 different spells which look like they do the same thing, or maybe one's like a better version of the other or something, but they're called Bone Shield, and basically they let you use shield abilities without a shield equipped. So yeah, I'm not really sure how that's going to work with the different durations on defensive abilities. So it seems kind of like a strange thing that'll have to be figured out, because obviously if you look at something like Barricade, the duration can be significantly changed based on the level of your shield. It's more than double at the highest level compared to the lowest level. So what level of shield is this Bone Shield going to count for? Maybe that's what the 2 different versions are. One is a higher level shield and stuff like that. Also affected is your resonance healing amount and a couple other defensives, debilitate, which I guess that would actually be interesting to see if that would even count, since debilitate doesn't require a shield but is extended in duration if you have a shield equipped. And yeah, there's not a whole lot else I think that's affected by the level of your shield, but still those ones are important, and it'll be interesting to see how that is handled. And then you have there's one called Threads of Fate, which allows you to temporarily have your abilities be AoE kind of, but only hit 2 additional targets on top of your original. That one doesn't sound that good, but maybe for certain situations, and I guess like Slayer, for abilities that aren't AoE, it would be pretty good. But only having it be 2 additional targets makes it a little bit less useful for something like Slayer. Then there's the life transfer is in there, which is the one that extends your spirit's duration. So that is that sounds like it's going to be very important to use for upkeeping their life, but also costs 50% of, I think it's your maximum life points. So it'll always deal the same large amount of 5,000 or so. So if you're not full health, that could get pretty scary, but it's definitely an interesting one, that considering its duration is the same as its cooldown, so technically allows for potentially infinite extension. And then these last two sound absolutely insane. So they basically just took the Eldritch Crossbow spec, Split Soul, and made it into one of these spells with no adrenaline cost. So I really don't understand how they're just doing that, considering apparently these can be used for any style. You just have to bring your little Necromancy hand weapon along with you to switch to, and then use them with that. So, I mean, is Eldritch Crossbow just going to be useless for a spec now? It's just going to basically only be used if it's you want to use it as a weapon, because this is just strictly far better, considering it's a spell and also doesn't incur adrenaline costs. So I don't really understand what they're thinking with that. That's a pretty crazy one. But then this other one sounds broken. It's called Darkness. Looked like it was the one that would be the highest level, and it gives you a 25% chance to dodge hits for 30 seconds with a 60-second cooldown. So for basically half the time, you will have a 25% chance to dodge attacks. So this is basically overall a 12.5% damage reduction straight up, because 12.5% of the time, if you're factoring in having it up for 30 seconds out of every 60, then 12.5% of the time you will be completely dodging a hit and not being hit by it. So, I mean, that's just crazy to me. That just seems like it'll be so strong for like anything. I don't know, like just taking less damage, like a huge amount less damage. And yeah, I don't know. That one sounds really strong, and I'm interested to see how that actually works, like the whole dodging mechanic, and if there's anything else that plays into it, or this is the only time it's mentioned or utilized. But yeah, those are the ones that I've heard about so far. I know there was like one or two more that I don't think was directly mentioned, but maybe I missed it somewhere, and you guys can let me know in the comments. But figured I could mention those off. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This is a little bit later, like the next day from the previous clip, so I've had a little bit more time to digest the the whole reveal and stuff. And honestly, I'm really excited for it. It does. The main thing that seems kind of weird to me is how the gear and weapon are just given to you, and upgrades are part of the skill. And it sounds like they're not going to really be anything that's even difficult to obtain time-wise at all, or anything. Like, you're just going to basically get it whenever you level up. You're just going to be given the next tier. That's what it sounds like. Maybe there'll be like a ritual involved that you need to do, but those don't look like they'll be taking an extremely long amount of time. And then that just goes all the way up to tier 90 weapon and armor. So that just seems kind of insane to me. And then obviously the fact that it goes for goes up to 120 for making other combat styles. So it almost feels like from here until the release, the only thing you should really be doing is preparing for Necromancy, because all the other things that you could be doing and getting other, getting weapons for other combat styles and things like that, all of those are going to be almost obsolete when Necromancy comes out because of how insanely OP it sounds like it's going to be. So I don't know. I'm not really going to get into talking about the individual abilities themselves. They did show quite a few abilities in their descriptions and what they do and stuff. One system that I'll mention is the soul harvesting and usage. So if you've seen any clips, a lot of them, people will have 3 little squares or dots under their current adrenaline bar and health. And that's basically how many souls they've harvested. There's an ability called Soul Harvest, and that gives you 1 of those. You can hold up to 3. And then there's some abilities which utilize those. One of those will unleash them all and deal a large amount of damage. And then the other one will use up 1 soul and is a 3-second stun. And importantly, these abilities that use up souls have no cooldown. They are only the requirement, which kind of acts as a cooldown, is that having Soul's ability, which this, claiming a soul, I think it's called Soul Harvest or something, does have a cooldown. But if you have 3 of those, you can use that stun ability back to back to back, and it's a 3-second stun for each of those. So that would be a 9-second stun, although you couldn't continuously do it without wasting it because of obviously the global cooldown 1.8 seconds. So you could do a 3-second stun, and then they'd have 1 tick of being unstunned, and then you could stun them again for another 3 seconds. I know stuns aren't really that usable in a lot of places, but obviously something like Telos has a lot of stunning potential, and I don't know, that just sounds pretty crazy to me. And those are the only 2 abilities they mentioned that directly use the souls. I don't know if there's others, but that would be interesting to see when it comes out. That sounds like a pretty cool system also to be managing. And it seemed like there was going to be a lot of things that were like stack based and things that you'd have to manage and keep track of while you're doing your abilities, and when to utilize your stacks to deal a big burst of damage or do something like that. Seems like it's going to be pretty interesting. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention that seemed pretty cool are the spirit summons that you're going to be able to bring up when you're playing. It sounded like they were going to be a little bit hard to bring up. They sounded allegedly they're going to be like ultimates, but there was one that's like 2 exploding zombies that'll blow up and deal a bunch of damage. They did like 10k each, I saw in some of the clips. And then there was others that were just like things that were attacking, like different zombies and undead that you brought up and were attacking for you. And it sounded like a pretty interesting system. So the longer they're alive, either they have a passive that buffs you, or they have stacks that they gain or give to you in some way. Basically, the longer they're alive, the better a lot of them will become over time. And so you'll be highly incentivized to use that life transfer spell to keep them alive. And that sounds like it's going to be pretty cool. And then if you reactivate their ability, the ability that summons them while they're alive, they each apparently have a special attack that they can activate as a result of you pressing that. And the longer they've been alive for without using it, a lot of the time that spec will be stronger in some way. I don't know. It sounds like it's going to be quite a balancing act, and I'm really interested to see how it all works out with having those spirits summoned. And I don't know. I'm really excited for the release. I know there's probably definitely some things that I missed talking about here, but if you have any questions or thoughts you want to talk about with me, let me know in the comments down below. Like I said, I will probably make some Hardcore Iron Man videos in the next couple days or weeks here to continue working on my clip backlog. But really looking forward to the release of Necromancy. Let me know your thoughts on the reveal, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.